Hello and welcome to The Extra Mile. I'm Linda BOUDREAUX. Our guest today is Bob Thibodeaux. Bob is the owner of Bob's Tree Preservation out of Church Point. And we're going to be talking today about tree preservation, soil conservation, and the things that we can do and need to do to preserve our trees. Bob, welcome.
Thank you.
It is so good for you to be here today. So we
Thank you for inviting me.
Chatting before we started today's show, and really there's a lot that we need to be aware of, don't we, in terms of just taking care of our soil and our trees.
Yes, positively.
What do you think the most important thing that people need to know is?
Good maintenance, good quality maintenance, and that starts with number one, soil care.
So bottoms up, huh?
That's right, bottoms up. Start with good soil, and you'll have a good tree. Bad soil, you have a dangerous tree. When storms come, that poor quality soil bites us.
So one of the reasons our trees don't stand up then is bad soil.
That's right.
I had no idea. I thought it was just, trees just not able to withstand, but they got to be rooted, huh?
They can only be well rooted in a good quality soil.
So, Bob, what makes for a good quality soil?
Organic matter. Look for the earthworm. We often hear that the roots of the tree follow the path of the earthworm. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I can tell you one thing, a good quality soil is going to have plenty of earthworms in it.
So if you dig up a shovel and you find worms in there, you're in good shape.
I like to find 3 to 5 earthworms per square foot of soil. Really? That tells me that my organic matter content is going to be at or above 5%. And I think that's a much needed thing for an urban tree.
I bet you hardly any yards have that.
Rarely do I find one, unfortunately.
So what can we do to get more earthworms?
Well, we find that the tree's best food source is its own kind. Mother Nature has got that figured out pretty good. Its own trees like their own leaves, their own twigs. And in the urban forest, unfortunately, sometimes we want to groom, and we don't want that on our soil.
We don't want that in our pristine yard.
That's right. But we just have to learn to compost it and then bring it back. Compost it, bring it back. You can't buy a better mulch than the tree's own kind. That's especially true, we find, especially with southern magnolia.
Oh, really?
Oh, that southern, and people don't like, a lot of my friends don't like southern magnolia leaves in their yard.
Oh, but they're beautiful.
But we tell them, let the branches come down to the ground, and it's easier to just push those leaves underneath. And if you watch that, you'll see you have a much healthier, prettier, well-rooted southern magnolia.
So what you're saying then is don't even rake the leaves up, just push them under the tree and let them decompose like that?
Yes, let them decompose.
Is that enough?
Well, the tree will feed itself.
Is it really that simple?
It's just that simple.
I want to make it hard, Bob. I want to work hard and sweat.
Well, I think a lot of us sometimes want to do that. But in tree preservation, we have our own mulch yard in Rain, right north of I-10. When we cut down a magnolia, and we don't encourage people to cut down magnolias because they're an extremely valuable plant, but sometimes they have to go, and sometimes we're trimming them, or we wind up with renewables, magnolia limbs and logs. We grind them and we put them off the side. And when someone calls me, tells me they've got a dying magnolia, I have my mulch. Because that's what that magnolia wants, its own kind.
So you can take that mulch that you created from a magnolia that you cut down or limbs that you cut off and feed another magnolia, and sometimes that'll save the tree?
Oh yes, very often, more so than any other magnolia in our observation. In our observation, the magnolia is very sensitive to its own kind. That leaf, that twig, that branch needs to go back underneath that magnolia.
Okay.
And it's not as visible when the branches come down to the ground. It's
And you know, part of it may be us just kind of rethinking what is pretty. I mean, seriously, you know, the leaves in fall are really very pretty. We don't necessarily have to just bang them up.
I love that fall color and those leaves on the ground. And when you think of all the good it does to the earth, then I especially like it. Because we can't buy synthetic compounds that's going to outdo that organic matter from our urban trees.
And you've used the term urban trees and urban forestry and urban soil in conversation during today's show and before we started. What do you mean when you say that? What is this whole urban tree business all about?
We really need our urban trees to help air quality, purify the air from my exhaust emissions and all the toxicities that we're exposed to in the urbanized areas. But the urban soil, our soil spaces are shrinking.
Is that because our houses are closer together?
Our houses are close together and we have very little soil space for that tree to survive.
Okay.
So what's becoming more so important is to make that soil as good as it can be so that that plant can survive the next storms.
If you don't care for any other reason, you best care about those storms that are coming, huh?
Oh my God, yes. We dread to see these storms coming, and we try to tell our customers that we feel like 80% of the storm damage in terms of trees is preventable.
Wow.
That is a lot. And I realize a lot
That's
of people in the industry don't support that. This is my observation, okay? And it's this old country boy doesn't always have things right, but it scares me. And I tell you what, it's close to it. And if it's only 40, 50%
that's still
preventable,
too much.
that's still
it's still
too
way
much.
too much.
But we often read, it's common knowledge to know that as much as 90% of our tree failures, trees that fall, is due to a poor soil. And the only thing that's going to enrich that soil, it's going to be organic matter.
So you just can't go out and buy something and put it in there and think that you're going to be able to meet the real substantial needs of that tree.
We have to go back to reconnect with nature and see. We have to go back and reconnect with nature. In a natural order, that tree feeds itself. In the forest, what do we see? Trees abort their limbs and leaves when it's under stress. And then when conditions get favorable again, and of course when those portions are aborted and fall on the ground, they decay and feed the microbes in the soil, and the tree picks up.
Because nobody goes and rakes them up.
Right.
You know, they're allowed to stay.
Rake.
They're allowed to stay.
All those wonderful people with all that courage, you know, to go out there and I kind of like that. I find I got other things to do but rake the yard.
Let it be.
When I stop and think of the good it does to the soil, and we can have our green grasses too. We just need to compost and bring these things back to our soils. Everything biodegradable needs to remain on a site.
So
then we're working with the ecosystem.
So it's keeping your trees' leaves in your yard in one form or another, and that is urban ecology, or being urban green. Is that fair to say?
That is.
So it doesn't sound like it'll be real hard to do. You think the biggest problem is people just don't know?
I kind of think our industry has failed to do more. We owe it to our people to inform them how simple it is to work with nature, and it's enjoyable. You know, I find it fun when I know that I've left a site better than I found it.
Not just tidier, better.
Better. It's very, very simple. The best soil conditioner for our soil will be the native vegetation.
Makes sense.
And when we look at the invasive species like our very infamous Chinese tallow and some of these weeds we don't like, they have removed valuables from the soil, and they need to be put back on the land.
Okay.
And the healthier your soil is, the less the invasive species moves in.
Because the native species are better able to survive?
That's right.
Okay, makes sense. It really, when you stop and think about it, it makes a whole lot of sense, doesn't it?
It's, sometimes I guess it's, sometimes I wonder why someone calls me a country boy from way out there in Church Point to go see about this magnificent tree somewhere. And I guess because the connection with nature is easier when you're out in a rural setting, maybe.
I don't know, Bob. You can just kind of feel it. It's just there. It's just there. So for tree maintenance, it's more than just trimming every few years.
Pruning is extremely important.
Okay.
Very, very important. Number one is soil quality. And I'd say number two is going to be proper pruning techniques. We tend to over prune a lot of our plants. And sometimes we prune them at not less than ideal times of the year.
Okay, so when should you prune, say, a live oak?
The cooler times of the year. From now on, in the heat of summer, we try to discourage people from. Sometimes you got to prune them because if you got a storm coming out, then you got poor limbs. You're just going to have to do some of them.
Yeah.
They may wind up through your roof or on
Right.
your head.
Right.
But the best time to prune is like from now on, during the cooler times of the year.
And a lot of doing it right is really respect, isn't it, for the trees, for Mother Nature, for the way that things need to go together. It's just not only is it better, it just treats things like they need to be treated.
That's right.
Because, sorry, trees are living. They're part of our community.
We need them. We need them.
Well, and you know there are tree huggers out there who truly love them. In fact, I think we have a Thibodeaux and a BOUDREAUX and Thibodeaux live oaks that tells us a little bit about people who really love them, huh?
That's right.
So what is the BOUDREAUX Thibodeaux live oak story?
Well, this lady called me one day, thanks to Dr. Foray, who is an icon here in our industry, and certainly one of my mentors. I dearly miss a wonderful man. He was very much into live oaks, into arboriculture, horticulture as well. But he believed in paying attention to the good quality trees. And one day, this lady moved down here from Memphis in Acadiana, and she saw these magnificent live oaks. They were for sale on 14 acres of ground. And she decided she was going to buy the 2 live oaks with the 14 acres.
She wasn't moving them. She was just going to buy that
Right.
property because she wanted the trees.
To be able to buy the trees, she had to buy the 14 acres and an old barn. So someone told her to call Dr. Foray, and she called Dr. Foray, and he mentioned to her that she should call me to see about the trees. And so I went to visit with the nice lady, and he also told her, the story she told me was, he told her that was probably the 2 best, finest live oaks he had ever seen.
They were beautiful.
Now I know he said that about a lot of trees because he was very passionate about our live oaks and wanted people to take care of them and preserve them. So she called me up, and I went to see about the trees and made a recommendation to prune the trees and so forth. And so she told me, she said, if you want to take care of my trees, she said, I'd like to name one of them after you.
Like name it, like officially name it?
Yes.
Okay.
Enter it with the Live Oak Society and called it Thibodeaux. And I said, well, that's fine, you know, I'd be glad to do that. So sure enough, sometime later, she winds up marrying BOUDREAUX. So she named one BOUDREAUX, I think with the Live Oak Society is registered as BOUDREAUX number 5239. And the other one is Thibodeaux number 5240. So every year, bless her heart, she sends me some acorns from BOUDREAUX and Thibodeaux, and I grow BOUDREAUX and Thibodeaux. If Dr. Foray says they were some of the finest trees you'd ever seen, that's good enough for me.
But what do you think of them?
Oh, I think they're outstanding. I love them.
I mean, after all.
I guess I'm partial to it.
I mean, after all.
My great-grandmother was a BOUDREAUX and I'm a Thibodeaux, so heck,
I mean, you got it in you,
that's
Bob.
it.
You got it in you. So you have, I think, a rather wonderful program called Acorns for Hope?
Acorns of Hope.
Of Hope. Okay. What is that? Good. I guess the BOUDREAUX Thibodeaux trees are part of that too, huh?
Yes. A few years ago, I started doing volunteer work for the Tree Trust.
For the what?
Excuse me. Tree Trust, every year we get together, a bunch of barbarists from around the country and Canada and some from Australia, England, and so forth. We meet and we have a 1-week bicycle ride wherever our annual convention is, and with the International Society of Arboriculture.
Mm-hmm.
So 1 week ahead of time, we get together on our bicycles, we ride and we plant trees and we talk to people about taking care of trees and the land and so forth.
How wonderful.
And I was doing that for a while, and then I kept thinking, God, I got a coastline but I was trying to get the conference to move down here, and I wasn't doing a very good job. So one year, I decided I saw how bad especially the Grand Chenier area was, the trees dying and so forth. Excuse me, and I decided I was going to do my own. So I called my group and I told them we were raising $3,500 per year from donors, and that money would go to the Tree Trust to do research programs with trees and so forth. And I decided that year that I was just going to get on my bicycle and my shovel, and I was going to go down and I was going to plant trees to whoever wanted them. Just to have something to do and ride my bicycle and plant trees.
Johnny
Well,
Appleseed,
when they called me, I want to know why I wasn't meeting them in Sacramento. I said, I can't go. Family things come up, and I said, I'll just do my own down here. So the word got out, and these guys started calling me. They wanted to come and help me plant. I said, wait a minute, fellas, I'm not organized here. I'm a poorly organized guy. I said, what I'm going to do, I'm going to get on my bicycle, and every night my wife's going to come bring me some groceries or aspirins or salve or maybe even a bottle of wine or something. Sharpen my shovel. Next morning I'll go back, and every night they said, well, we're coming. It turned out I had 59 volunteers for coming out here, and I told my wife, I said, what in the world am I going to do? And they said, whatever you do, we can. I said,
hold up. So you had 59 volunteers that came from where? All over, or Louisiana?
Actually, there was very few from Louisiana. I was afraid to invite anybody that I wouldn't have a good program. Now, these guys out there, I've been riding with them several years. They're a tough bunch. They'll find something to eat. They'll do for themselves, and I was worried about narrow roads in Louisiana, weather, that kind of thing. And
what time of year do you do this?
The week before Thanksgiving week.
Okay,
usually
so it's
around
autumn.
the 15th or 16th of November through stopping on the Sunday before Thanksgiving, which is usually around the 20th, 21st.
What a great tradition. So y'all came, and what did you do?
They came over, and most of them, some got lodging at some of the hotels around here. And several stayed at I have bed and breakfast cabins on my tree farm that are quite rustic. They're made from recycled logs and limbs. So,
I mean, what else, huh?
Yeah, talk about.
Really?
So they, most of them stayed there.
Okay.
But then the ladies stayed at a hotel, and a couple of hotels here in Lafayette and in Rain. Okay,
and then you all got on your bikes? Was this
Actually,
a bicycle
what
tour?
we did, we had a big tradition is, this is fun because we treat people, and one of my favorite gumbos is squirrel gumbo. And I love to squirrel hunt. Well, most of these people are not into the squirrel thing at all.
I can see why.
But I got him, I said, hey, that's what we get. Sorry, if you love the squirrel gumbo, you're gonna love trees, you can take care of them. But you need the energy and the spirit of the squirrel to go through 300 miles of riding bicycles, rain, and everything. So I got these people to eat squirrel gumbo, which was something, was quite an ordeal. Southerners is no big deal, but for people, especially in Canada and California, man.
Not doing that.
So I fed them with squirrel gumbo. Next morning we got on some buses and vehicles and we drove to McNeese, city of Lake Charles, welcomed us and just opened up. They fed us and we had just a great time. We planted them a couple of hundred trees also. And then after a couple of hours, we, well, maybe 4 hours, something like that, meals and planting time. Then we got our bicycles. We had a couple of support vehicles.
Yeah, you got to
that
have
followed
that.
us, yeah. And we started pedaling the 300 miles from Lake Charles to New Orleans.
Planting trees.
Planting trees, talking about trees, getting rained on.
How many trees did you plant that year?
That what we barely made the 2,000. I didn't realize, but 2,000 trees is a lot of trees.
Yeah, that's a lot of holes you dig in.
Especially if you're going to plant, ride, and talk about that for during the winter months. Yeah. But by the time we got to New Orleans, we had 1,386 trees planted. We planted a lot down below. We had wonderful people helping us. The Terrebonne Parish Tree Board in Houma was, I mean, they fed us, and the parish president owned his own hotel, and he put us up and fed us, and we went down below Houma, where a lot of trees died the last few years, and we planted a bunch of
I understand
trees.
there's a lot of real concern about the ecosystem down through there.
It's a part of the world that I'm very concerned about, because there's a lot of people believe that it's going to be underwater in 30, 40 years.
That's what I'm hearing, a lot of concern.
And I'm not sure exactly what our live oak trees are going to do, but I'm glad that my live oaks are being planted out there.
But you know, it's like you were saying a little while ago, before we started, but the live oak is a coastal tree. It's really well suited for the conditions along the coast, huh? Much needed tree here along this coastline. I hate to see so many of these old, and I was in Grand Chenier the other day, and it just kind of makes me feel bad to see so many of these old, centuries-old live oaks are gone. They're dead. Could they have lived longer had something been done to help them, like soil or?
Soil, well, salt water intrusion. Of course, when plants...
Can't help that, huh? You can't change that.
Well, the species is tolerant to salts, but, you know, there's an old saying that our live oak usually die from multiple injuries. When you look at salt, urbanization, a lot of these trees are on private property. So it's, we try to donate our trees we got to draw the line somewhere.
Right.
So we try to stick to public properties to plant these trees. Well, there's just not that much public properties out there that are privately owned.
Yeah.
And who do you see about planting?
That's true. You just can't go stick them anywhere. Huh?
That's right. You got to give them. It's very important to try to plant these trees. Of course, I think along Grand Chenier we should have these trees planted. I hate to see that place not being replanted.
Is there an interest in doing that? Is that happening?
There is, and I'll offer to our Acorns of Hope would gladly donate them some young trees, you know. But it's, you know, we talk about it, we got the word out, what's going to happen, I don't know. We're just praying that it gets replanted, and it needs to be replanted with live oaks. And
why live oaks as opposed to another oak or a cypress or a magnolia or anything? Any
will help, but it's part of the world, I think, that the live oak does such a great job of slowing down winds.
Really?
Yes. And some researchers claim that as much as 70% reduction in winds.
From a live oak?
A live oak.
So that live oak can stand and stand up through all that and reduce that wind?
We find that if we can allow these branches to come down to the ground and have the tree in a healthy soil environment, that tree is going to slow down the wind. It'll go back and forth, and it's going to.
It'll move with the wind, but it won't break.
With the wind. But its roots are very important also, because wind movement, it's a coastal species. So wind movement also seems to stimulate root growth and helps hold these soil banks together and slow down erosion.
So it really just helps top the bottom,
That's right.
you know.
And it's such a great place to grow. They're tolerant to salt, so that's another good reason to have them.
It seems like a no-brainer when I talk to you. It seems like they would be out there planting trees at
Well,
least on an annual basis just because you can do that.
I'd love to see our live oaks planted along Interstate 10.
Me too.
I think that would be, knowing that we grow the world's finest live oaks.
And we
That-
do.
it's
We
Here in
do.
South Louisiana. And we have a lot of nurseries that are growing these magnificent species. And some kind of way, if we could just line up Interstate 10 with that, it'd be a nice way to control the storm winds. Slow
And
down the road and purify the air.
And it would be a lovely, it would leave people, visitors or travelers, with a lovely impression of Louisiana.
They'd love to come out here and see the finest live oaks of
They
the
sure
world.
would. They sure would.
Maybe slip in a few BoudreauX and Thibodeaux live oaks in there.
So could people get the Boudreauux, Thibodeaux, or any other of these trees? Are they available for
Oh, yes.
sale, or how do
Oh yes,
we?
we've got thousands of them growing on our farm.
And where is your farm?
Our farm is it's in St. Landry Parish, midway between. Well, it's 2 miles outside of Church Point.
Okay.
Like going from Church Point going towards Sunset.
And so people could just
It's
give you a
growing
call.
on land that's been in my family since 1756.
Wow, you know where your roots are too, don't
That's
you,
right.
Bob?